And we've got that going. And Matthew, if you'd like to introduce yourself, and you can share a screen and start the presentation.
Okay. So hello everyone. I'm Matthew Metz. I'm the founder and co-executive director of Coltura. I'm calling in from Seattle, Washington. And I'm going to talk today about regulatory work to basically race to the clean car future. So how we can get to electric cars and clean cars fast enough to meet the urgency of the climate crisis. I just want to thank the club and Julia and everything for reaching out to us. We're really glad to have the opportunity to present. We're actually interested in possibly working with people in Colorado to pass legislation in the next couple of years. So yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, so Coltura was founded in 2014. Our mission is to improve climate health and equity by accelerating the switch from gasoline to clean alternatives. And we're working towards a gasoline-free America by 2040. So we're not really an EV club, but we understand that EVs are central to the moving beyond gasoline, that there's no other way to do it. And so we're very pro-EV as a result. So we work on the problem from 3 different directions. So we work on gasoline demand, and that is like state EV mandates, public fleet electrification, things that really will result in the reduction of demand for gasoline. We also work on gasoline supply. So actually we've done pretty extensive study of gas stations, how they work, how where their subsidies are, and there's actually huge hidden subsidies for all the environmental contamination that they produce. So we've published on that issue and are trying to basically undermine those subsidies and really get the gasoline distribution network kind of cut down to size. And then finally, we work on gasoline culture, and that's kind of a catch-all for a lot of different initiatives. We have a gasoline music video where we've done a mural. Actually, we're doing another one right now. We have a children's book coming out. So different initiatives to try to get the EV discussion and the gasoline discussion just sort of off the business section or of the paper and really into other parts of life and into other places that people see it elsewhere, people who might not otherwise be interested in EV but would still get the message. And so the reason the cigarettes there is we analogize it to smoking using gasoline, and what we're trying to do is just how smoking has become kind of undesirable and socially suspect. Ideally, we'd like to do the same for gasoline. So yeah, this kind of shows how it all works together. So we're trying to get that wheel spinning. So I mentioned the cultural shift from gasoline. And then if we can get that going, we'll get support for more anti-gas policies, and that will result in fewer gas cars and gas stations, and the cultural shift will just keep spinning the way that it has with smoking. There was a cultural shift, and then there were more anti-smoking policies, fewer smokers, and more anti-smoking policies, and it just keeps going. And so we hope to do the same with gasoline. So yeah, I was doing a little research. You guys are probably familiar with this, but basically a quarter of Colorado's CO2 emissions comes from transportation, of which gasoline is the largest part. It's about 75% of that. So about, yeah, probably 17–18%. This is the trend for gasoline sales in Colorado. So as you can see, it's just been on a slow and steady march upward. Now it's about 2.3 billion gallons a year. So yeah, it's just been continuing to grow. Colorado, its population is growing, vehicles are getting bigger. So it's even though they're maybe getting a little bit more efficient, they're also getting bigger. So it just keeps marching up. Same trend in the United States. Just slow and steady increase in general. There's been a few dips, but with COVID, but I think probably in 2021 it's going to come back to where it was. So yeah, I showed where the trends have been going. Now we talk about where we kind of need to be. So the red line there are the goals set forward in a bill that was passed by the legislature. I think it was in 2019 in Colorado. So basically, the goal is to cut carbon emissions 50% by 2030, and that's pretty heavy, but that's basically what we need to do. That's in accordance with the Paris Agreement, with kind of keeping the Earth to 1.5 degree warming. And sectors can fight it out a little bit. Oh, that cut should all come from the energy sector, or this sector, or that sector. But basically, it really needs to come from all sectors equally. And gasoline is actually just as low hanging fruit as any other, if not more so. So we really need to be thinking about, well, how can we cut gasoline use by 50% by 2030? Which, going back to this, that would be a big change in the trend. So how can we do that, and how can we start moving things in that direction? So now I'm going to talk a little bit about what's happening in other states with phase out of gas cars and really aggressive policies that will lead to the reduction in the use of gasoline. So probably the most aggressive move was made by California in September of 2020. That's Governor Newsom's order to phase out the sale of new gas cars by 2035. And so that order still doesn't have legal effect. He's directed the California Air Resources Board to make those regulations, and that's in process right now. I'm not sure how familiar you are with the ZEV program, but yeah, Colorado it just joined it, I think, in 2019, and I think actually their rules are still going on, but that will tie California and the other, I think, 13 ZEV states to California. So they'll at least have the option to join California in phasing out gas cars by 2035. But and some people say, well, we should just, 2035, that's pretty good. That's pretty aggressive. We should just wait till California's regulations are all done, and then we'll just sign on with that. There's a couple of problems with doing that, though. The first of all is that 2035 is actually kind of late, I just showed that slide of, well, we're supposed to cut 50% by 2030. And, if we don't do that till 2035, and that's only new cars, it's going to make it really, really hard to achieve our goals if we do that. Then secondly, there's no guarantee that California is actually this is going to happen anytime soon. After the California Air Resources Board issues regulations, then it's going to be subject to a bunch of legal challenges. The oil industry and others don't like this. And so under both California and federal law, there's going to be a bunch of challenges. And then the final rule must still obtain a waiver from the EPA. And this, it's pretty much a given that if the Biden administration is still there at the time that the application is made, the Biden administration will approve that. But it could be that the following year, Trump, or like if he comes back or someone else, would just revoke that the way that they did previously. They revoked California's waiver, and and that basically thrust the whole clean car regulation system into chaos. So there's no guarantee, but it's solid progress, but it's not enough, and it's not too certain. So now I'm going to talk about my home state, Washington. So our Clean Cars 2030 bill. So because of some of those factors that we talked about, the uncertainty of the California legislation, the fact that 2030 is really too slow to meet the needs of the climate crisis, we decided to introduce a bill that would phase out the sale of new gas cars in Washington state by 2030. And it would have allowed people to keep their 2029 and earlier gas cars as long as they want. So, if someone says, well, I can't tow my boat over the mountain pass, with an electric car, may or may not be true, but anyway, they could buy a 2029, Ford F-150 and tow for the next 15 years or something. And by that time, it's pretty much guaranteed that, all the models will be available. Anyway, so that really dealt with a lot of those concerns. So there was a lot of debate and discussion and disputing about this in the legislature, but eventually we passed it through the legislature as a goal. But then just this week, just 2 days ago, in a huge upset and reversal, Governor Inslee vetoed it. And it's mainly due to provincial concerns, and disputes with other legislature and who did what and some language and things like that. But that was unfortunately a setback, because Governor Inslee is generally fairly progressive on climate issues. But anyway, it got vetoed. But it was broadly popular with the public. So this graph shows the support. So we had 59% of people were asked, would you favor the phasing out of new gas cars by 2030 if model year 2029 gas cars could be driven indefinitely? And yeah, 59% said yes, 35% opposed. It was a fairly large survey, and the support for it was pretty strong across most of the board. Democrats strongly in support, independents fairly strongly in support, and even Republicans were basically equally divided, slightly opposed, but not overly so. And our Republicans probably just as conservative as yours are in Colorado, and so there was pretty broad support. So these are some of the national members on the coalition. They didn't necessarily support the entire bill, but by the time it became a goal, all these organizations were in support. You probably have a lot of them, the same organizations operating in Colorado. I know NRDC has a big operation in Colorado. I'm sure you have 350, Sierra Club, Center for Biological Diversity, Audubon. So there is a base of national organizations that are supportive of this. So, and this is part of a bigger picture of momentum. So I've talked about California already and Washington. New York actually just last week passed a 2035 goal that orders the governor to do basically everything he can within the law to phase out gas cars by 2035. New Jersey's sort of made noises in the same way, as has Massachusetts. Hawaii has been, there's been a bunch of bills introduced in the legislature to do it in 2030, and British Columbia is there in 2040. And Colorado in the energy plan, and here and there, there's been mention of sort of phasing out gas cars. There's not really been consensus around a date yet. Of course, in Europe, it's really quite far along now. So United Kingdom is probably the biggest country to decide to phase out gas cars by 2030. See Netherlands in there, Denmark 2030, Ireland, Iceland, Sweden, all 2030. Norway is doing it in 2025, and then France and Spain are they're a little bit behind, but they came out with their target 3 years ago, and I expect that they're going to update it. Then the European Union in general has been talking about a date for phasing out gas cars. It could be 2035, it could be 2030s. So yeah, this photo kind of pains me because it's the Broncos, but scoring on the Seahawks. But so there's kind of three things that we ask people to do to really push clean cars forward. So yeah, first of all, something that your group is probably very committed to is driving electric. By the way, so that guy right there, he's the star of a children's book that is coming out this September by Coltura, and that's Sparky, and so yeah, hopefully you'll be seeing more of him. Uh, a lot of things that people can do is really get their employers more involved in electric vehicles. So electrifying the corporate and government fleets, that's extremely important. Another thing is that there's kind of a trend, especially in the West Coast, I'm not sure in Colorado, but really pushing employers to enable their employees to work gasoline free. And so that can mean a number of things. It can mean work from home, which a lot of us have been doing. It can mean really good charging access at places of work. It can mean, yeah, the corporate fleet gets changed. So, but really making it possible for companies to work without the use of gasoline and start to evangelize that that's a really important goal for companies. Just the way that the companies have been working on cleaning up their power supply, we think that the same should be done for gasoline. Another emerging area, which is this is pretty cutting edge, is getting companies and institutions to require that their packages be delivered by zero emission vehicles. So basically, a city or a hospital or anyone who receives a lot of packages can institute a policy and saying, look, if you want to deliver a package to us, we don't want you bringing your stinking diesel vehicle to do it. You need to bring it on an electric vehicle. And so we're working on policies in California, especially to do that, but that's going to be an emerging trend. And then finally, kind of what I talked about earlier is supporting Clean Cars 2030, supporting policies that will result in phasing out of gas cars by 2030. So yeah, I'll just mention again. So Coltura, we're actually working on getting financing right now to advance Clean Cars 2030 legislation in 5 states. Colorado is definitely on the list. And so, we may be having more discussions with you guys and others in Colorado over the next month or two about that once we get the financing a little bit more tied up. We're also working in Silicon Valley. We have a project called Joint Venture Silicon Valley, and which is kind of like a quasi-governmental entity for the Silicon Valley area, San Mateo and Santa Clara counties there. And the goal there is to achieve 50% gasoline cuts by 2030. So yeah, that's an ongoing project. We do a lot of research on gasoline and just how it's used. And so one thing just kind of interesting that we found is that the top 10% of gasoline users use more gasoline than the bottom 60% of people combined. So what that means is that the only way that we're going to achieve massive cuts in gasoline is if we get the people that drive a lot, who tend to drive in big vehicles to convert. Because right now, unfortunately, is that most of the people that are changing over to electric vehicles are not very heavy drivers. So they drive maybe 7,000 to 9,000 miles. There's various numbers, but tend not to be very big drivers. So not that much gasoline is being displaced. So we have a report coming out next month about the people that use the most gasoline and what strategies and policies would be most effective in getting that those people to convert. And basically what it is like kind of maybe reorienting some of the subsidy programs towards bigger vehicles, towards gasoline displacement, and rather than just the same subsidy for everyone. Then yeah, I mentioned some of the cultural projects we have. We have a mural going up next month that's actually going to feature Sparky, and yeah, we have a children's book, some other projects as well. Yeah, and so why am I doing this work? Well, it's for children. So this is a kind of a collage of all the children that either my children on here, a lot of the people at Coltura's children, and some heroes as well, like Greta Thunberg's in the corner. But that's what it's really all about, is doing this for the kids and making it so that that they actually have a habitable planet. So, and right in the middle, we invite you to kind of think about your kids or a kid that's important to you, and just kind of think about that when you think about EVs and gasoline. So that's it. Happy to answer any questions and that you guys may have. But yeah, thanks for listening.
What was Governor Inslee's veto message about why he vetoed that law?
Yeah, well, he said something like, well, what had happened is just in the legislative sausage making is that one legislator who he's a senator that chairs the Senate Transportation Committee, he's concerned about road funding. And so he said, okay, I'll allow this goal to go through, but there are also it will only go through when 75% of people are subject to the road usage charge. And so the road usage charge has been very contentious in Washington, and the governor said, well, the 2030 goal is too important to tie to the road usage charge, so therefore I'm vetoing this. And we never wanted that tied in the first place. So it was just, so basically it was just kind of this legislative food fight, well, between the governor and the thing over and these two don't like each other, and so we got kind of caught in the middle. Our bill did, unfortunately. At least that that was a stated reason.
How are you proposing to pay for roads? I favor a vehicle miles travel tax and not one of these registration fees like we have in Colorado and making it bigger.
Yeah, no, I mean, I totally agree. I mean, that's the thing is like they're really, well, road usage charge and vehicle miles travel is the same thing basically. And,
well, what's the road usage charge? Is that a common term in Washington State? I haven't heard it here.
Yeah, that's the term that we use, but it's the same as a VMT charge basically. How
is it administered? Is it in existence now for electric cars?
There's like a small pilot for electric vehicles. And that was the other thing is that the way it had been drafted, it required 75% of vehicles on the road to be subject to the charge, which would obviously include the gas vehicles. And so the question is, well, do you have a gas tax, or like do you have a gas tax and a road usage charge, which would be very controversial, and so yeah, it's a mess, but no, I totally agree with you that the road usage charge vehicle miles traveled is absolutely essential. It's the best way to pay for roads. I mean, how you phase out the gas tax while doing that is an extremely complex question, and people will differ on that, and so part of it is we're dealing with that issue. But that is an issue. It is worth noting that getting that issue under control is going to be really important, because EVs can't really advance properly if we don't have a way of funding the roads.
Also, you have to consider people that drive from out of state. How is your state going to do a road mileage traveled tax on people who aren't registered in your state?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. And then someone told me the other day that he said, that actually like trucks cause like 10,000 times as much damage to roads as passenger vehicles. So, should that be taken into account or not?
Well, yeah, because I'll just be quick. It's the power of 4 on the weight, and linear with the miles driven. So
I didn't understand that. You're muted.
I say well, no, let Julie go and then I'll explain it.
Oh no, I was just going to say, yeah, it seems like weight should be taken into account as well. So there should be some formula that has weight and road mileage, which would give EVs a slight disadvantage because they tend to be heavier, but they also probably cause more road damage, so that's fine.
Yeah, Carl's got it. What I'm saying is that weight aspect in the equation is raised to the 4th power in terms of how much it damages the road.
Yeah, but basically, so you just, I mean, that's what makes it so complicated, is you have these overlapping interests and ideas and theories, and and no one wants to get stuck with the bill. And so,
we have some taxes, like including I think income taxes, where you get a credit for taxes that you pay elsewhere. And one of the ways to make a vehicle miles travel tax fair would be to apply it to everybody, but then allow people to deduct from their VMT tax the taxes that they paid on gasoline, and for a state tax, doing it in the state. And as for people from out of state, yeah, that's always going to be an issue, but it evens out. And we've got many areas in this society where people are are not paying for use of things because they're out of the jurisdiction or something like that. But you can't have that hold up the application of something like a VMT tax.
Yeah, that's true. And then, there's the argument, which is really, there's kind of opposing arguments. One argument is that the gas tax is the only carbon tax that we really have, or the main one. And so why would we want to get rid of it? And the flip of that is like, the government should not be in business with the oil industry. Right now, the government is 25% partners roughly with the oil industry on the sale of gasoline. And that is a corrupting force that actually keeps us tied to gasoline. And you can really see it in these legislative transportation committees, where these guys are extremely concerned about revenue so they can do their road building projects, and they don't want anything to happen to their revenue stream, including in EVs pose a threat to that. So it's just really it's a Gordian knot.
One other thing to add to your knot tying is you said your organization wants to promote larger EVs, because that's the larger cars are using more gas. But at the same time, then you're also adding heavier, more road damaging vehicles to the mix. And I think you should also consider not minimizing smaller cars as you promote EVs. And then one other thing is, on one of your charts, you were showing the increased use of gasoline and mentioned that it's partially because of larger vehicles, but also keep in mind that the population growth in Colorado has been pretty extreme on the high end of most states, and that's probably feeding that as much as anything.
I believe you just got an electoral vote.
Yeah, I think that's true. But and there is danger in that message of saying, oh yeah, we should promote larger vehicles, and these smaller vehicles are really inconsequential when it comes to gasoline usage, because they're also consequential, but not as much. So yeah, it needs to be messaged very carefully. But I think as long as you have kind of you don't have a mandate, then people are gonna really, America just loves SUVs and big vehicles, and trying to get them to go into smaller vehicles is gonna be a struggle. So
Part of the reason for that is that's what gets advertised, because
Yeah.
that's where the profits are. And so if you join that bandwagon and you're advertising larger electric vehicles, you're also adding to that perception and encouraging people to continue that. Maybe you can, promote that to the people who are already sold on driving the big boats. But you might be able to also switch people to smaller cars because of the many advantages they have.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I think that's fair.
I want more attention paid to the long haul trucks, the semis, because I look forward to the day that that semis are cruising silently downhill, generating electricity that's then used to accelerate the next time they go uphill. It'll make it less pollution, including particulates that come with diesel fuel, and a quieter environment.
Yeah, and so we're part of a national coalition. We don't really work on medium and heavy duty vehicles that much, but there definitely is a lot more emphasis on that. But unfortunately, I talked about phasing out gas cars by 2035. Like the heavy duty vehicles, it's going to be a lot later. At least that's what where all the targets are headed, like 2045 or even later, and and partial. And so there's still a lot of work to be done on that side of the equation.
Hey, Matthew, this is VJ. Just changing a little bit direction. Do we have further information on long distance batteries or the capacity? Because the EV cells are so battery anxiety, on the people. So if I have a EV in my possession that allows me to go 700-800 miles on one charge, and I keep seeing a lot of ads in the kind of internet saying that there's a battery that's a 1 million mile battery, but I think it's garbage. But do we have any data at all on longer, bigger batteries? Long distance batteries?
Yeah, so I think that both Tesla and Lucid are coming out within the next less than a year with 500-mile batteries. So that's going to be kind of like the biggest one right now. But in general, the trend line has been going pretty sharply up towards bigger batteries. Like I don't think anyone right now is selling an EV with less than 200 miles of range.
Correct.
Yeah, so I mean,
Yeah.
it's definitely the trend is in the right direction. And but obviously there's that trade-off of weight, and there's a lot of trade-offs as you get to the bigger batteries. But I think you're absolutely right. I think that will help alleviate a lot of concerns, especially for these heavy drivers that I was talking about, the ones that use the most gasoline.
Correct.
That those people, they drive a lot. They might drive 300 miles a
Day.
day, a couple times a week, and so they're going to want to make sure that they can have that same capability with electric that they do with their gas vehicle.
Yeah. The saltwater batteries, I'm more technical type of guy. The saltwater batteries were coming up, but then I had heard again on the internet, and don't trust the news that much, but saying that the lithium ion guys are, squawking and they're putting kibosh on the new battery development because there's so much investment. Tesla and everybody else has put up some plans, for lithium ion, but lithium ion, the power density is to its end. You can't really improve so much more on it to what I know. But just curious if there is any good research or some money should be allocated from the government to make battery that would last me 1,000 miles, in a single charge, then I can get rid of this gasoline car much faster, easily.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's a vast amount of financing and resources going into battery development right now. It's kind of a golden age of batteries. On the other hand, it's true the lithium ion technology remains dominant.
Yeah.
But there's other options with lithium. Like there's just a new one where it would be a lithium solid state, and people are excited about that. And if you follow this area, every month or two there's a new battery announcement, some new technology.
Yeah.
But then it turns out, well, because of this or that thing, it creates fires, it wears out too fast, it doesn't charge fast enough. It's just a lot of criteria that a successful battery they have to meet all of them. And so usually there's one or two that they fail on, and so the quest goes on. But I think in general, with all the resources, all the attention going towards it, and a lot of technological developments, I do think that it's just going to continue to increase. And I don't know if we need to get to 1,000-mile battery, but if we could get to everyone has 400 miles of range and you can charge in 10 minutes, that might be good enough for pretty much everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think I hope the infrastructure proposal from Biden does include mass transit and a lot more access to the mass transit. Then we can get rid of the roads and we can get rid of the cars and have it just only for trucks and other people only, where to move the goods. That some research should happen in that arena to high-speed trains and maglevs and all that. That will really improve the whole infrastructure, and less maintenance also, because every 2 years, local roads are just put the tar back on it, and it's like a contract given to these people, and they love it. And every 2 years it wears out, so why can't we put concrete roads, which last at least 10 years, and I don't have to keep repeating that. But who knows, anyway. Money counts.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of your suggestions are really good, but the way that we see it is that we're in an absolute sprint to get converted to EVs, and get stop using gasoline just to meet the climate imperative. And because of our land use patterns in America, especially like in Boulder, huge boulevards, extremely, the whole area is spread out, in the subdivisions, that mass transit is going to be really hard to adopt quickly enough, and provide quality service. And so we are kind of left with EVs to deal with the climate crisis in the near term.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Matt, I'm wondering, what kind of work are you doing with hydrogen and electric vehicles, or is that not included in your purview?
Well, so in our 2030 bill, hydrogen was included as an acceptable alternative. So we defined it actually within the rubric of an electric vehicle to include hydrogen. So So yeah, but on the other hand, hydrogen just does not seem to be a significant player. It has certain political constituency, especially among Republicans. They like hydrogen. They like the idea of not sort of, overly going down the electric road and things like that. So, we included in the bill, but I mean, basically pretty much all the manufacturers with the exception of Toyota and I think maybe Honda have abandoned hydrogen. The idea of putting hydrogen fueling stations everywhere is not attractive, extremely expensive and complex. So, and also, the charging times of electric vehicles is shortening a lot, which is really the only reason to have hydrogen in the first place. And to the extent that that charging time number shrinks even more, the case for hydrogen really goes away.
Matt, I really appreciate your comment about changing the culture. And in Colorado, we have very much a culture of oil and gas development. And this results in, as you can imagine, quite a lot of rolling coal out there on the roads. So, with things like the electric Hummer coming down the road and hopefully some pickup trucks, I still don't think it's enough to convince these folks that electric's the way to go for them, because it's part of their literal culture. It's a part of their identity and who they are. And I've met head on that resistance on a one-to-one basis, and it's just a brick wall. There's no amount of coaxing, convincing, hey, drive my car, that will convert these folks no matter what. And I wonder if you have any suggestions on how we deal with that attitude when we experience it.
Yeah, actually, I mean, I have a little presentation on that very topic. I don't know if there's time right now to present on that, but just a couple observations. Yeah, is that, first of all, like that problem really hasn't been studied of how to convert those people. The understanding of like how gasoline culture works, is not really very well understood. So I'd say that, that would be a start, is to really, explore deep down those attitudes and explore kind of what stories and narratives would be able to move people along, towards electric vehicles, because change happens on issues, even like race and these very difficult issues. Change does occur, but it's time consuming and difficult. But a lot of it relates to stories that people tell themselves, the stories that are present in the culture, and maybe also sort of hopefully with EVs that people have been watching gas car commercials on TV for the last 70 years every time they turn on a football game or something, and so it's very, very ingrained. And so yeah, how do you reverse that? How do you tackle that? It's like it's a really tough thing, and until you do, you're right, you can talk about how great EVs are till you're blue in the face, but it might not make that much difference. But other time, a lot of people are very concerned about money, and especially if these big drivers, if they figure out, hey, I'm spending $6,000 a year on gasoline, I could cut that to in half or more if I got an EV plus the maintenance, blah blah blah. I mean, like those economic arguments are going to be important for a lot of people. So there's different roads, but I agree. I mean, from this is kind of woo woo, but gasoline, is basically concentrated power. It's like associated with the American power structure. It's associated with, our military. A lot of icons of power are associated with gasoline. And so I think people, like the experience of going to an EV kind of, or the idea of it, I should say, makes people kind of feel powerless, like their power is being taken away, that they're kind of moving away from sort of, say that nexus of American, industry and power and military, and so that sense of powerlessness, I think, is an issue. Just as like if you take away someone's gun, they feel like they're not powerful anymore. And so, yeah, those issues are real and really tricky.
That's a great framing right there. The that you used because it's the exact opposite of me being able to get in an electric car and drive for free from coast to coast has freed me from the oil cartel's imposition of profits over my freedom. So I wonder if that's kind of the way to go about it.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's about domestic fuel. You got to get your fuel from, well, Canada, that's friendly. Nigeria. On the East Coast, we get our fuel from Nigeria and Angola. Hey, do we really want to have another war in Nigeria? No. And believe me, there is temptation to invade Nigeria because the oil is coming from there. So I get my fuel from domestic, and you could get your fuel from domestic. And isn't that American to get your fuel domestically?
Or even just from your, DIY on your roof,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm very proud to have an American-made electric car that drives off of American-manufactured energy. So, but even so, I say that to folks, and they're like, "I still want my my diesel."
Yeah. No, it's tough. And but we got to just kind of keep chipping away at it and awareness, and one thing about gasoline is that it's been really understudied. You think that everyone would know, gasoline's been such a prominent feature of American life for 100 years or something. Everyone would know everything about it. In fact, it's almost no resources have gone to studying the many different aspects of it. And so all the time, like, we're coming across like this whole idea of gasoline super users. It seems like obvious, like, who are the people using the most gasoline? No studies on it. No studies on like this cultural thing. No studies on actually a lot of the environmental impacts. No studies on gas stations and like very little on their environmental impacts. So it's the society hasn't really been trained on it. It's been kind of a force field around it because it's been regarded as a political third rail to do anything that could possibly affect the supply of gasoline or its prominence in American society. Actually, I will say though, on the flip side, just as I was showing you guys that polling, people are actually like kind of open to change, and that was actually the biggest surprise. I didn't think that the polling was going to come out nearly as positive as it did, but there's like a pretty substantial percentage of people are willing to move beyond gasoline. So that's kind of the good news. So it's a mixed bag.
I have a question about that chart that was on the screen a little while ago. It said gasoline gallon equivalents. Why? What do you mean by equivalents over here on the left? Gasoline gallons.
This one right here.
Yeah. Why equivalents? I mean, it's gasoline or it isn't, right? What's the? We talk about.
That's a good question. I got that off the Alternative Fuels Data Center website, and I didn't look into that question. I don't know what exactly.
Well,
maybe
it does make
ethanol,
sense.
Like, it could be like, oh, ethanol is this, but it's not gasoline. I honestly, that's a good question. I just sort of took it at face value.
It sounds to me like those numbers would include electric cars because we talk about gasoline miles per gallon equivalent miles per gallon or whatever. And you said you got it from the Alternative Fuels database, so that probably the actual gallons of gasoline is probably going down.
No, because because I looked at the data for Washington and it matches up with other Washington state consumption data. So I do think this gasoline equivalents. Yeah, I need to look. That's a great question.
Okay.
I need to look more into that, but I do think it probably fairly represents gasoline consumption. Maybe, I don't know what that would.
Another question I've had from the beginning of your presentation is how did you come up with the name Coltura? I understand culture's in there, but what's Coltura?
It's CO2 and culture. It's a combination. And actually we started out really looking at the cultural issue, and that's kind of where we started, and then we kind of moved more into policy in like 2017. Yeah. So but yeah, that's the reason. Okay.
I put a link in the chat for a company in Europe that is creating a trailer, a semi-trailer that has 300 kilowatt battery and electric drive, so that it does allow a diesel semi that's pulling that trailer to go quietly downhill generating electricity. And when you're going downhill, the trailer is pulling on the tractor to keep it from gaining speed. And then you've created all that electricity quietly without burning diesel fuel, so that electricity can then push the tractor next time it needs to accelerate. This is the future, I think, the intermediate future of electrifying the long haul trucking industry, is to have trailers which serve that purpose without converting the tractors themselves.
So what what are these so-called super users driving? Like, is there any data on what that kind of mix of vehicles is?
Yeah, so here, if you want, I'll just give me like 2 seconds and I'll find it. Hold on. I'll just,
While he looks for that, I will say that at some point I should share with you guys the chart that I have of the price of gasoline since like 1913 all the way up to, and I haven't updated it since I think last year. But it just shows you the spikes and everything. It's kind of interesting to look at.
okay, here, yeah, here it is. Well, I don't know, did you want to show that now, or should I?
Well, it's a Google spreadsheet. I mean, you do your thing. If we have time, I'll show it.
Okay, so this is the the top 10% super users. So yeah, that's better. So yeah, so pickups are roughly a third, SUVs are a third, these are vans, and 28% are cars. And this is for all users. So it's like 42% pickups and SUVs. Of course, you know, like I just was reading that of like new car sales in 2021, I think it's like almost 70% of new car sales are pickups or SUVs. So sedans are down to only like 30% now, or about, yeah, or a third. Here, just if you're interested, here's some other. So this, oops, here, sorry. So yeah, this kind of shows that super user phenomenon. So yeah, so these guys up here, this is the top 10% of users. They use as much as the bottom 60%. So most EV users are like in like the these are called deciles, like in this group right here that are using like this is roughly like 200 gallons a year or so. So here, this is actually, so this is gasoline use by percentile. So this would be about the 90th percentile right here. That's 1,000 gallons. Actually, it turns out to be right almost exactly 1,000 gallons a year, and it goes up from there. And so yeah, so again, most EV users are probably like displacing about like 200 to 300 gallons a year on average. But so that's the thing. It's like we gotta get these guys up here, and you know, like especially these two categories, because this is half our consumption. So we have to cut our consumption by half, by 50%. There's no way that we even have a prayer of doing it without this.
Are you looking at individuals or families or commercial?
Oh, these are actually vehicles. These are actually vehicles. So each vehicle, each of these numbers represents roughly 25 million vehicles.
Are these commercial vehicles on the high end, you think?
There's some well, they're like, yeah, there's some like vehicles that are driven for work. And yeah, I think some fleet vehicles are, yeah, that's kind of a complex question, but the vast majority are just privately owned cars.
So it's not skewed by taxis and trucks and delivery vehicles, etc.
Well, no, I mean, well, taxis would be, because like most taxis, no, but like, you know, like Ubers and stuff like that, those would be considered. Yeah, and so this was a household survey, so yeah, it's not going to get so much at the fleet vehicles, but you know, fleets are, you know, a pretty small percentage. They're like I think probably 1% of all cars, but I mean significant. I mean, there's a lot of that are used a lot. See what else. Let me just see if there's anything else that you want to, that's kind of interesting. Yeah, so yeah, the age of vehicles, this is the top 10%. So you know, a lot of them are aging. So these vehicles, you know, if you run the numbers on these vehicles that use vast amounts of gasoline, it starts to become pretty attractive to convert to EVs, especially if, you know, the government would give them a good incentive. And then plus their maintenance costs are going up because if you're driving, you know, 40,000 miles a year and your vehicle has 150,000 miles on it and it's 10 years old, you know, it's just, you're going to have huge repair costs. And so it starts to get pretty attractive to just almost give these people, or not give them, but, you know, give them at least a good incentive to get EVs and then convert. But yeah, this is kind of interesting. So this is where people tend to be. This is Second City here. We're just still working on this, but yeah, rural. A third of the heavy users are in rural areas, and then you know, Second City, that would be you know, maybe like a Grand Junction or something in Colorado terms, and suburban, you know, also important. So, but yeah, it tends to be a little bit heavier rural. This is the overall for all drivers, all a little bit more skewed towards cities and suburban. But yeah, so from an income standpoint, the income, it's pretty much the same. So like you know, so the super users are pretty much the same level of income. Anyway, so that's just kind of a flavor for that research.
Is that research available as a PDFs or what?
So yeah, so we're gonna actually do a big release on it, and this is like, hasn't been released yet. So, but next month it's gonna come out.
Can we get that?
Yeah, I'll send a copy to you guys and to Julia. Maybe you can spread it around.
Thank you.
I've
got to leave now. I've got a meeting. I've got to leave, but it's been fascinating, and thank you very much.
Okay, thanks.
Sorry, I can't stick around.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Jim.
Looking at the income group of the highest burner there, it looked like that might be in the high commuting group. So maybe it's tied in with problems with housing and distance from work.
Yeah, so I mean that's definitely going to be an issue with some people. Is that issue? Yeah, of commuting to work, and so, you know, for a lot of people, it's commuting to work, driving in work, contractors. I mean, how we sort of started this research is that, well, first of all, like my mom got herself a Soul EV, and my mom drives probably 1,000 miles a year, and you know, she got the same $7,500 tax credit as, you know, anyone would get. And then, you know, I was talking to my plumber, and he drives, or a painter, I should say, and he drives like, you know, 800 miles a week, you know, in a big pickup. And it's like, well, does it make sense for both my mom and the painter to get the same incentive? And, you know, what policies would really make sense? Because, you know, the painter uses 60 times more gas than my mom does. So how do we really get to that painter and make it worth his while to convert?
Carbon tax. Yeah,
but you know, the thing is like, carbon taxes from a political standpoint are really messy. They haven't done very well, and it's kind of punitive, you know, especially if you don't give this guy like a, you know, much of a bonus to buy an EV or whatever, then you're just kind of like laying it on him. And so I mean, in a lot of ways it does make sense, but politically it's never been very popular, and people hate gas taxes and stuff. So it's kind of better right now to kind of ladle subsidies onto the EVs and for those people to do. And so basically, like what we're proposing is like subsidy, instead of like a 7,500 across the board subsidy for every EV driver or everyone who buys an EV, you should get a subsidy based on your gasoline displacement. And so let's say, you know, because like when you buy a car, your odometer is read by the DMV, and then when you sell it as well. And so let's say you bought a car 3 years ago, you put 90,000 miles on it during that time. So you would have a 30,000 mile average year. Let's say your car averages 15 miles to the gallon. So you're using 2,000 gallons a year. Okay, so if you got $6 for every gallon of gasoline displaced, then you would get a $12,000 incentive. Whereas if you were only like my mom, who you probably use 30 gallons a year, she would get $180. And I'm not saying there shouldn't be a floor or something like that, but a system more like that where it's really helps those big users get off the road.
I think some of these cost issues are going to solve themselves, especially by 2030. Because I think, theoretically, electric vehicles can be extremely inexpensive. So I think last quarter, the most purchased EV in the world, which used to be the Model 3, is now the Wuling Huangguang in China, which costs less than $5,000. And it's supposed to be a pretty good car. I mean, obviously not as good as a $30,000 car, but I think that in 9 years, the United States will get the memo that you can actually produce a pretty cheap EV that works fine in the city, and maybe not a great range, but is fine for people of all income.
Yeah, a used Leaf right now will get you that cheap car here.
Yeah, but like for example, like in Washington, I don't know if it's true in California, you can actually get there's still actually a lot of 2020 Bolts left over. You can get one for like $24,000, and they have not been selling. And that's a good car that drives, whatever, 250 miles on a charge. And so it's just these small cars, electric cars have just not been that attractive, and it's not just the price point. So, I mean, I kind of agree with you, but I think it's going to take more than that as well.
Matt, I'm seeing bills going around the country where they're really jacking up the fees on registering your electric vehicle and your hybrid. And it seems too coincidental to me to be organic. Is this an issue that you guys have your eyeball on? And if so, is this ALEC? Do we know?
Well, I think it varies from place to place. Yeah, I mean, definitely is a policy of ALEC, but I will say that in my state of Washington, we had some environmental organizations, we were not part of this, but they agreed to raise the EV fee to fund the EV incentive. So, which, my view was insanity, but that happened. So I think there's a lot of confusion over this policy, what it means, what its effect is, to what extent it dissuades people from getting EVs. But yeah, I would definitely say that there's some people that have an interest in the gasoline status quo that are also pushing this. So, and probably the most powerful. So, it's not, just because we're working on a different issue, it's not like our focus, but we're definitely aware of that. And it's something that really needs to be taken on. And, in general, I would say like the EV associations, like there's a lot, they need a lot more support. They deserve a lot more support. They're all volunteer run, just probably like yours is, with no budget and stuff. But, they're carrying out a very important social function, and they've been kind of neglected. And I think a lot of the foundations and people that fund environmental organizations need to look at really like strengthening the local EV association, the national, like the EAA. Also, I mean, they basically have no budget, even though they're doing incredibly important work. And, like, just like the ride and drives and stuff are, arguably the most important marketing that's happening, but it hasn't got the love that it deserves. And so EV drivers are fairly disorganized still, although it's, it's getting better, but a lot of work to do.
Thanks, appreciate your comments.
I thought, since I did promise, I'll see if I can share this graph. It's a little bit hard to see, but let's see if I can do this. Thanks, guys. Just a sec. So this is what gasoline prices look like. It's you can see it sort of starts. First of all, I should explain what's going on here. It's a lot of trends that you're looking at, but the blue and the red. The blue is sort of the true price of gasoline, which you can kind of not see until you get into the mid area, right around 85. And the red, you can see it just sort of is pretty obvious in that pre-period where it's jumping up and down. That's because I've taken the price of gas and subtracted off inflation, what it would be in real dollars. But you can see, I mean, way back when in the early century, it was quite expensive. Here we go. If I can get to the grid. So it was up to 380 when you adjust for inflation. 30 cents back then, but 380. But you can see, I mean, all these trends of like 2008 spike and then all the other big spikes. And then unfortunately, I don't have the data going past April of last year because I have to update it again. But there you go. That's what gasoline has been doing. It's pretty weird what it's been doing. But the trend lines are what I think are most interesting because you can sort of guesstimate when it's going to become 5. And now maybe it'll be a while, but that's what I'm reading. That's what I wanted to share. But I apologize that I haven't updated it for a year. And it will be interesting to see what this week looks like if they average in the price of gasoline over here on the East Coast, which, as y'all may not know, I'm over here on the East Coast where we are actually experiencing those gasoline shortages.
Matt, just a couple more comments about the small cars. And I understand why you are veering toward the large ones. I hear your reasoning. But for the Chevy Bolt, it recently had a battery fire problem. And also, General Motors had started out with quite a deficit from their treatment of the EV1.
Yeah.
So you might not want to stake your whole evaluation of small cars on the sales of a Chevy car with those recent problems.
Well, that's fair. That's fair. I mean, Chevy's had its problems.
You know, as I told some of the others, that fire, it's literally a couple towns over from here.
Unfortunately, VW is not bringing their ID3 to the U.S., at least not yet. That would be a good test to see how that would sell. They have quite a history of being able to sell Rabbit and Golf-sized cars.
Yeah. Well, the Zoe would have been a nice addition to the Leaf line.
But the Model 3, the smallest car that Tesla makes, is selling like gangbusters.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Matt, there'd been some interest in some electric cargo vehicles, especially Nissan was making a Leaf version of their smallest cargo van. They were going to send some here. They didn't. I haven't been paying attention. Are you guys pursuing those light truck applications that could fill delivery? I mean, you must be. You mentioned it earlier.
Yeah, well, I mean, our law applies to vehicles less than 10,000 pounds. And so most of those light vans would fit in that category. I mean, I'll also say that, you know, one of the bright spots has been, there's been a lot of emphasis on urban delivery and trying to push those companies to do it. And, you know, I think Amazon has promised by 2030. So a lot of them have promised by 2030 to move to all electric delivery vans. And I think that there are some ones like that are, you know, coming on the market next year. I kind of lost track of the timing of them, but there have been a bunch of announcements of vehicles in that category, but I haven't seen a lot of them on the road, so I'm not exactly sure.
Thanks.
Well, okay. Does anyone have any more questions, or we can? It's over an hour, so we can call it.
Thanks, Matt, for coming all the way to Colorado.
Okay, well, thanks.
That was great.
Great group.
Hey, before we go, Matt, so the Denver, so the DEVC does not do lobbying. We don't have the IRS status for that. But if any individuals want to get a hold of you and maybe, you know, learn more about possibly doing some something in Colorado, how would they do that?
Yeah, so here, I'll just put my contact back up. Let's see, that's right. There. So yeah, that's probably the best way is just to email me there at matthew@coltura.org. And yeah, I'd be happy to talk to you. And yes, I'll be out there in August, and I will be meeting with different groups about legislative possibilities in Colorado. So if anyone's interested, you know, in talking to me when I'm out there, I'd be happy to do that as well. And yeah, and if you can catch the presentation at the ASIS, the Solar Energy Society, that would be good too. We could meet up.
Yeah, Matthew
Okay.
will. Yeah, Matthew will be putting your email address and some information on today's discussion in the newsletter. So that goes out to a pretty good sized group of people. So that will be there if anybody, you know, wants to know more and wants to contact you, that'll be there.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks. And yeah, maybe sometime if, you know, like if you're interested after, I can, if you'd be interested, I have a kind of a cultural angle on gas cars and EVs, and we could talk about that and what the kind of like the more symbolic and cultural themes on that sometime. So that might be kind of fun.
Okay, cool. Well, we thank you for joining us today and with this presentation.
Okay. Well, thank you. Okay. Good luck, you guys. Okay.
All right, and thanks.
Bye-bye.
By the way, are we, I mean, David, are you gonna put this recording anywhere or? I mean, I don't mind. You have my release.
What's that again, Jeffrey?
Are you gonna put the recording anywhere?
Yeah, we're working on that. We working on a YouTube channel because we've got about 4 different recordings to get on there. So we're going to try to kick that in gear, and we'll have that in the newsletter too, to you know, have the link and stuff for all of that.
Yeah, so I'm gonna follow you guys as soon as it's up.
You haven't got it up, right, at this particular time?
Say again, Bob?
I say we don't have that up. at
No,
the-
that's not up currently. We're trying to get Drew to get that in place.
Okay. Because I found that Aptera had done our last meeting and put it out on the internet.
Really? They've done their own recording.
Yep. So
I did it a two-part thing. Jeffrey, I can send it to you if you want.
Oh, sure.
If you have it.
Yeah, let me put my,
Are you on Facebook?
I'm also on Facebook. Yeah, that, well, actually, that Time Horse also works for Facebook.
Okay.
Under that one.
I will find you and I'll get it to you. Or join the DEVC group. We'll let you in.
Yeah, and plus, you can reach me.
well, we've got 2 faces that we haven't seen in a while, and that's Tim up in Golden, and we've also got Rick Williamson has joined us too today. Good to see you, Rick.
Good to see you all. And Dave, I'm wondering, there were several good comments on the chat. Is there any way to get a hold of those? Because I know there was some links and things.
Yeah, if you're on your computer and you go to the very lower right-hand corner of the chat box, you see those 3 little dots?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, click on those 3 little dots and you can go down and save chat. And that will save that to the computer, and everything that's there you'll have. It'll put it in your notes.
Okay, I got it.
Okey doke. Well, thanks. We'll
Cool.
call that it for today.
Nice to see you.
Good to see you guys. Thanks
Good,
for
Bill.
getting that
Alrighty.
guy. He was a really good guest. So thanks very much.
Oh,
It's
you
for-
bet. We can all thank Julia for putting all this together for us. So,
Tim, are you still in Colorado?
Yeah, I'm out in Golden.
Oh, you're, okay.
Yep.
I thought
Been
It's
laying
been-
low.
it's been a long, long time since I've seen you, but I thought you were going somewhere or something. I probably
Well, before a year ago, I was always going somewhere.
forgot. But I meant to live somewhere else, I thought, but anyway. Well, good to see you again, Tim.
Same here, everybody. Take care.
Bye.